Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to tell you my 5 favorite Linux tools right after this. So I started to do a couple of other things that I wanted to work on today, and didn't quite get them finished, but I did start working on this, and so I want to tell you about. A lot of people will talk about their favorite tools in Linux, and so these are mine. I've collected these over the years. Some of them came from books, some of them came from trial and error, and some came from advice from peers, and one came from a big mistake. So I'll have some IT stories here for you today as well. So let's get started. Um, yeah. Yeah, I have made mistakes in the past, and yeah, they were doozies. So the first one is a single user mode. How do you get Linux into single user mode? There's a lot of ways to do this. I'm sure that once I put this out there, I hope that you guys will all share the way that you like to do it, but this is mine. So sometimes you have to drop into single user mode because you can't log in. Maybe your password was changed and you don't know what it is. Or maybe there's a problem with one of the file systems that's preventing the system from coming up, or one of the daemons that might be holding your system down. But there are a number of reasons why your system will not go into multi-user mode. And so the only way around that is to drop into single user mode. Now, occasionally you will find, particularly with volume mounts that are being done at runtime, the system will automatically put you in single user mode to correct the error. At least most of the modern ones that I have been around lately have. Don't always bet on that happening. So, as I say, exceptions are the rule. So what I want to do is kind of step through some of these examples with you. And so let's start with what we need to do to get into a single user mode. So to do that, I'm at my grub screen, and I've stalled it from automatically taking off by just moving my cursor up and down a couple of times, and then that will kill the clock. So I want to edit this, and I press E, which is right here, E to edit the commands, and I get the list of what grub is actually gonna do once I pick that top entry on Debian. So I'm going to come over here, and at the end of that Linux string, I'm going to put systemd.unit equal rescue target, and just make sure that is correct. Yep, that's correct. And let's see. Next thing, I need to do a control X. And that should start me up. And it is coming into single user mode. Now you'll notice it's stopping for the root password. That is being controlled by a control file. So you can enable that or disable that. Now, I don't recommend that you disable it unless you think that you have a rampant problem with someone changing your root password. And if you do, well, you might want to just go talk to them about it. So, Control D in this instance will go ahead and boot you into your graphical session. So it'll just bypass this. That's not what we want to do, though. And we want to actually go into the root mode. So I am actually in single user, and I can go ahead and I can see things, but I may have to mount file systems in order for them to show up, particularly if they're being mounted, during the system boot process. I may not see them here. I may have to mount them up and do stuff with them. Yeah, I mean, effectively, this is depending upon what applications you have running in run level 1 versus run level 4 or 5, whichever one you choose to run, 3, 4, or 5. So anyway, once you're done, you just exit, and then it should continue on with your default, whatever your default target is set for your system. And normally that's the graphical target if you're on a workstation. First thing, before we go into the explanation of what those are, the first thing I always do when I'm building a server is, what am I trying to achieve with this? What is the goal of this server? Like I said, I only do one. I purpose my servers for one thing, whatever that might be. That's why I run ARM processors, is because they're small and I don't feel that bad about having to run a bunch of containers on them or cutting them up into multiple VMs. I can just throw cheap machines at it. Now in production, in enterprise-wide type systems, you won't want to do that. But because there are performance implications and loading implications and scaling implications for that. So, but for me at home, that's all I do. So anyway, what am I trying to achieve? And then I'll look at what is installed on the server. A lot of times you go to install what you think is a minimal distribution. You get a bunch of stuff that you don't really want. So does it make sense to have a print server installed on a box that's serving as a DNS server or a bind server? Probably not. I mean, you probably don't need that. Or do I need a GUI like GNOME installed on my servers? I mean, do I need that? And most of the time I'll answer that no. Now, if you're coming from the Windows environment, you may feel differently, and that's fine. So, but I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just saying I wouldn't do that because there are security implications on Linux for having a server up. So with graphical capabilities. So what do you mean by, what is setuid? For those of you that don't know, setuid means that I'm setting the permissions of this particular executable, that is the executable file itself, to assume the role of the user that is specified as the owner. So when you do a change own, a chown, a CHOWN, you're assigning the user to that file. So it might be root, it could be your name, it could be bind, it could be some other daemon name. But whatever it is, the setuid will run that process as if that particular user executed it. So if you have root in there, that is going to run that process as root. Not always the best of ideas. So this is now there are times when you have to do it. You have to run as root, just simply because of the nature of the type of process that it is. One I can think of right off the top of my head is cron. You definitely would want to do that as root because you want to be able to have it span across the number of users that are on the machine. Plus, you have to be able to interact with have files. Plus, you might be getting the time and date from an external server, and you have to be root in order to set that when you do a time correction. So yeah, sometimes you just have to be judicious about which things you're allowing to be setuid. GetUID is the second set of permissions, and that is setting the owner of the group to say that says that this particular executable will run under that group label. And I already have the setuid in a shell script. And I guess I could put these out. I don't know. Maybe I just need to post them into the description. It's not very complicated. It is the same one I showed you, except I am going to redirect the output of the find to a file called setuid.txt. And so I am going to run this as sudo so that I can get inside of directories that I normally would not be able to. And then we'll do a find. And we'll let this run. And it'll take a minute. Now, normally it would come back to the screen, but in my case, I have it going here. And there are the setuids. Now, you can tell they're setuids because in the first position, there is an S right here all the way down. And this is the owner of the setuid because that's the owner of the file. So these are all setuid to run as root. So you need to check these very carefully and make sure that this is really your intention, that you want root privileges to run with these. And you would also need to look at what some of the side effects on these particular apps might be. For example, do they have an escape to the shell? would be one that you would really want to make sure you didn't leave as a setuid, because that would backdoor your system. So yeah, anyway, so that's that one. Let's look at, let's see. Okay, so it's the Perm 2000, which is going to be looking for setgid applications, and this time it's going to put it in a different file called setgid.txt. So I'm going to do, I'm just going to correct this a bit. And again, this will take a little bit, and then we can do a set. Now you'll notice none of these have setuid. So this is running as this group over here. So these have the same privileges as shadow, mail, utemp, tty, root, cron tab, ssh, and so forth. And these are the applications that are being granted those permissions via the setgid command. So you would have to see, again, what type of thing that your particular server is doing, and does it make sense for these applications to be here. Now I notice a number of these are mail utilities. So do you need to have mail on the box? Probably so, because there are a lot of error messages that get posted to, particularly cron jobs, that get posted to the root account, for example. So yeah, you're probably going to want to keep mail, and that's where they would end up. And so you would have to have somebody checking those periodically on the inside. So the third tool, sudo. Sudo is a great tool. It allows me to grant root privileges to someone. I can give those privileges to another user without having to share the root password with them. So, but the problem is that I have always found the default template to just be wide open. I was like, whoa, if you trust everyone on your, that has sudo privileges, if you trust them, then fine, leave the template the way it is and don't mess with it. But if you don't, if you have any questions at all about whether or not you want to allow, say, developers full access to your box, particularly if it's a test system or even a production system, you may not want to do that. So, so there's two things that are in here by default. You'll see root all equal all, colon all, and then all. That is wide open. The root has everything. That's kind of like everything that root is granted through sudo. And so if you assign a user to or the root privilege, if you sign on as root, you get everything, but of course you should. Sudo down here is a group specification, and that is also assigning all colon all. So what the heck does all that mean? What does that gobbledygook mean? So the syntax of the sudo line is the first column is the user, and then the machine, and then you have an equal sign, and then the effective permission, and then the user, and then finally the command. So if you see all colon all in parens, that you are granting effective all to colon all users. So that's what that means. First column, and then let's see, what else can we, and then the third column, the commands actually control what the user can actually run sudo to do. So you can actually limit the command set that user has control of. Maybe it's just to kill particular applications, and you can specify which applications you want them to be able to work with. Plus, you can also specify which commands they're allowed to use on those particular applications that are running. So let's try to work through an example here. So suppose I'm a developer and I need a sudo on a development machine. So I could use something like DJ Ware, and then I can put the machine name in dev.macknife.info, and then do all, and that grants everything to me as a user on a dev box. However, that doesn't, if I'm using the same template on other machines, that does not allow me to do sudo on any other box other than dev. So that limits my ability to run on a specific machine. And maybe this is my home development box that I am assigned to, or maybe it's a group development box that we are posting our changes to. So suppose you have a long list of users though, and you don't feel like entering individual lines like that one at a time, one at a time. Yeah, we don't like to do that in Linux. We're lazy. So one of the things that we can do is we can assign aliases. And the first type of alias you can assign is a user alias. And that is defined by saying user underscore alias. That's the construct, so don't leave that out or don't misspell it. Webmasters is the name of the alias. And then the equal sign is my list of users that I am assigning to webmasters. So all of the webmasters that I have defined are DJ, Ware, Juliet, Harriet, Marion, and Ted. Those are my webmasters that I'm going to assign stuff to. The next type of alias is the command alias. Now, these are optional whether or not you specify these or not. So I'm limiting them to being able to run only one command, and that is run as alias Apache, and that is equal to the Apache CTL command, and that's it. That's all they get to do. They don't get to do anything else, at least on that box. So they can stop, start, and see the status of the Apache server. Basically, is what you're allowing them to do. The host alias specification is the host servers that you're going to grant that particular template access to. So host alias web servers, and then I have www.example.net, my domain, your domain, all that stuff. So I have, again, my list of domain name servers that I'm assigning. Then when I specify the privileges, I would put webmasters, webmaster servers, and in parens www, which is the user, www, and then Apache. So these people are all getting the same privileges as www, but it's limited to this specific command called Apache control. Now, sure, you could add additional ones in there, again, with the comma, and add more than one command. So yeah, you can do that. And they don't have to be related to Apache either. If you want them to have a permission to do a kill all, or you want them to have the ability to run cron jobs, you can add those things and at and all that stuff in here as well. So yeah. So one of the biggest worries I had and still have is trying to find the pig. Now, we used to talk in Unix about hogs. Um, there was all kinds of tools in Unix to find process hogs, to find ones that were consuming memory. So we find memory hogs. We could find disk hogs. And so this one is, because it's Linux, I always call it the file pig. But it's one of the biggest worries I have is that if you have a file system that is dependent on journal entries or log files or something like that that can fill, depending upon if you got a server that starts throwing errors, you can fill up a file system in a big hurry. So one of the things that I would always do before leaving for the weekend is look for any kind of critical amount of storage. So if I have some, now you could of course do a DF if you wanted to see where your file system mounts are actually consuming, but you won't know what the files are that are consuming it. So this will allow me to find out what the files are that are consuming the most amount of disk. So I would add an alias to my bash rc or z shell rc, whatever shell you like. But I would create an alias pig, and I would set it equal to du minus cks and star. That gives me the file name plus the amount of blocks that it's taking, and then do a sort on the rn, which is sorted by the largest files to the smallest. And then I only wanted to see the first 11. Now you want to see the first 50 or the first 20. Just change that minus 11 to whatever number of files you'd like to see. But in my case, I don't care about the rest of them, because usually once you get past 10, they're usually not as big as you think. Most of them are in the journals. Most of your files that you will find, particularly in the var log file, you're going to find most of them are in the journals. So if you need to run this as sudo because you maybe you're running it on var logs and you want to be able to go through all of the paths, then yeah, you can't run a sudo on an alias. That won't work. So you'll need to turn it into a script and then run your sudo on that. But for me personally, I was able to do this because, again, most of my logs were in the web servers, and so they weren't part of the system. And I was all that concerned. And you can find out what aliases are in use by just typing alias. Uh, but in my bash RC, all the way at the bottom is where I put in the alias for pig, and that is assigned to du minus ckс star. I'm sorting on the number, and I'm only listing the first 11. So yeah, so let's go ahead and run that in. Now, if you attempt to do this, it's not going to find pig because it's an alias. If I type pig, it'll look in my local directory, but I may not be able to get it to work if I'm inside of, say, let's go over here to, yeah, you see permission denied, permission denied. Yeah, so that's not going to work too well, is it? So you'll probably find that if you're running scripts like this, an alias is not the best choice. So you probably would want to run a shell script. And now in my case, I have it beginning with a directory. Yeah, of course it's not. All right. There you go. And that'll list from the root directory down which directories are taking the most amount of space. But again, it isn't telling me any details, so I might, var looks kind of heavy. Let's see what var is. So we can kind of tree down through it. Yeah, lib is kind of heavy. Let's find out why. And you get the idea. So you can just kind of drill down into the directories and you're looking for who's taking up all the room. Now, one that I would be really looking at would be this, would be log. Now, in this case, this machine hasn't been up very long. It doesn't have a whole lot of log entries, but give this about 3 or 4 years and and you haven't cleaned out your logs. Yeah, that's going to get big. So, that was somebody else's problem. Listing processes using patterns. Now, you probably know about ps minus ef to list the processes. You probably know about kill all and all of those things, but there's another way to do this. And the way I prefer to do it is a shortcut called pgrep. So pgrep will take a list of the PIDs that match a pattern. So I don't have to know the name of the file exactly. I can put a pattern match in and it will match everything that's running according to that pattern. And I can also specify a group of users. So if I want to just see the groups of if I want to see the processes that are running under root or the processes that are running as a daemon, I can do that. Or I can add those options in. It's a -u to do that with the pgrep. Or otherwise, you just do a partial pattern match and it lists out all the PIDs that are on the system and running. So there's 2 additional command variants here. You can do a PID wait and a pkill. PID wait, I don't really find it all that useful. It will wait, instead of listing everything out, it'll wait for the process. So yeah, I don't really find it that useful, but you might. Pkill will actually allow me to kill the process, but not just crash it. If you do a kill all -9, you're sending a crash out to the application, and that's not always the wisest thing to do. I learned this lesson the hard way in the early days of my career when I did that to a database app. I had been loading for about 8 hours a huge inventory file for a e-commerce site. It was monstrous. It was probably in the millions and millions of records that were being loaded. They had tons of products that they sold. And there was a problem, and I just did a kill all on the secondary load. The first load was done, and I was doing a secondary load on another table. And yeah, the problem is that when you do a kill -9, you are telling the process to stop right now and get out of memory. There's no the application doesn't have any chance whatsoever to do anything to close out. And databases as their last thing they normally do. Now, of course, they do update periodically the time and date stamp on the table, but um, occasionally it'll fall out of sync with another table. And the last thing a database server does when it comes down, like most of them, Oracle is one of them, that when you bring it down, it will write the time date stamp out to the table header. And so if those are out of sync, when you try to bring Oracle back up, for example, it ain't going to restart. It's going to tell you, I got a problem. The date and timestamps are out of sync. And you can you can go in and you can bit twiddle it back in and make it kind of work, but you'll probably run into other issues because there's more that goes on in that last event that cleanly closes out things. So yeah, you might find missing records. You could find all kinds of problems that just didn't get flushed out of memory. So yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way. I ended up having to reload again the first table and start over. So I lost about 8 hours and was up late in the night as punishment. So yeah, that happens. But I didn't use kill all -9 ever again on a database server. So anyway, but you can choose what signal you want to send. So if you want to send an interrupt, which would be to tell Oracle, for example, to close down cleanly, yeah, it would be just like it would just be like doing a stop on the same signal as a stop, and then it would shut down cleanly, and then you don't have to worry about such nonsense. So let's do a man on pgreep first, and you'll find that it's really a conglomerate of three different commands. So pgreep, pkill, and pidwait are all in the same executable. And what we have here is we have some options and then a pattern. Now would be a similar pattern that you would use under grep. So yeah, and you're looking through the currently running processes, and all you're going to get back, unless you put in options for it, all you're going to get back is a list of the process IDs which match your criteria for selection. So if I put in pgreep by itself, it'll just say, you need to give me a pattern because it really wants to run. I mean, if you're going to do that, you'd probably be better off just doing that, right? So let's try pgreep, and we'll look for, let's see, we'll look for what processes. I see some here, 1762, 1741. So I'll just look for processes that are running under me. 1762, 1741. There they are right there. So all these others are being run by my user account. So yeah. And then if I wanted to blow all of my processes away, I could do a pkill, and I can send a signal. Let's send maybe a signal 1, and again, I can do the user thing, DJ Ware. Now, of course, that's going to log me out, right? That's going to just push me out. So I don't want to do that. Let's try another pgreep. This time let's look for, I don't know. Let's look for a match on event. And this time we have a number of those as well that are running. So you can see that this is a really helpful way of being able to do things. I mean, it is the classification of this is called procps. So procps has a it is a little bit different than your ps commands, and this works a little bit different than your ps-ef and your kill all. So yeah, it works a little bit different than that. So another command for your toolbox, hopefully. So those are these are some of the tools. These aren't all of them. I'll probably do some more of these later on if you guys like this sort of thing. But these are some of the tools I use. Some of these are modern. Some of these come from the Unix world. Um, so yeah, I mean, but you learn these things, and I just want to pass it on to you in case you never had seen this stuff before. Yeah. So The formal of that last one, the formal name is procps. And those are a set of utilities which allow you to directly manage the processes on a machine. So they're a little bit different than some of the other utilities. I think you'll find them a lot nicer. I prefer to use patterns because trying to get things exact isn't always the most fun thing to do. Plus, you can pattern match more than one thing. So if I was looking for web servers and I was looking for maybe I was looking for the CGI processes if I was running any of those or any PHP processes that might be up and running along with it. That I need to find out what they're doing, if they're hung or if they're running or whatever, then that's helpful for me. Because you can take that list of process IDs and then you could pipe it into something else. Again, that's the power of Linux, is that you can take pieces of one application, pass the data as part of the input stream to another, and do more processing on it. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you did, please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again real soon, and bye for now.